My fiancée cried. I never wanted to marry you. I've always wanted him. Caught in our bed with my half-brother. So I disappeared, rebuilt my life. 2 weeks before my new wedding, her name appeared on my phone, and the moment that notification showed up, it hit me like a freight train straight to the chest. That cold punch of memory you think you've buried. But apparently your nervous system keeps receipts forever, and I just stare at the screen thinking there's no universe where I should be seeing her name again after 6 years of absolute silence. After vanishing from that entire city, like I was erasing myself from a chalkboard, after rebuilding everything from rubble into something that finally felt like peace, like stability, like a future I actually wanted. I guess I should start at the beginning, though honestly part of me hates retelling this, but I know how Reddit works and context matters, and maybe putting it into words again will help settle whatever is shaking inside my chest right now. 6 years ago, I was supposed to get married to a woman named Brooke, and back then I thought she was everything, smart, gorgeous, kind, or at least she pretended to be kind in the way that people do when you don't yet know them well enough to see the hairline cracks in their mask. We had been together for 4 years, lived together for most of it, planned a whole future down the side of town where our imaginary kids would supposedly play baseball, and I really thought I had nailed the whole find your forever person thing on the first try. The night before our wedding, I was staying at a hotel with my groomsmen, doing the boring final hour stuff, when I realized I had forgotten to grab the backup wedding band from the apartment. No big deal, right? I had a key. It was 10 at night. Figured Brooke was probably at her hotel or with her bridesmaids doing whatever last night rituals brides do. Except when I walked in, the lights were on, the place looked lived in, and I heard laughter from the bedroom. But not just laughter, her laugh, the one I thought was mine, except softer, breathier, way too intimate. I walked down the hall, opened the door, and there she was in our bed with my half-brother, Mason, and they didn't even look surprised in the way you'd expect when someone gets caught. It was almost like a quiet exhale of, finally, like they knew this moment was inevitable. I didn't scream, didn't throw anything, didn't even cry. I just felt my entire insides turn to dust. Mason tried talking, something about being sorry, but I couldn't hear anything except Brooke saying through tears, I never wanted to marry you. I've always wanted him. And it was like someone reached into my chest and wrung my heart out with their bare hands. I left immediately. Blocked them both, canceled the wedding, packed 2 suitcases by sunrise, and drove out of the city by noon. I didn't tell anyone where I went, didn't answer any calls. Cut my dad off, too, because he took Mason's side, like always, and claimed I was being dramatic. And I started fresh in another state, because staying there would have felt like suffocating in the lingering smell of everything they destroyed. The first year was agony, I won't lie. I worked until I almost collapsed every night, because if I slowed down, the memories crept in. I had a buddy from college who had been pushing me to join him in starting a construction software company, and I finally said yes because I needed something big enough to drown in. Somehow that drowning turned into swimming, and by year 2 we were stable. By year 3 we were growing fast, and by year 4 I bought out his half and expanded into 3 offices. For the first time since everything fell apart, I actually felt like I could breathe without feeling the punch of betrayal in my ribs. And then I met someone, Alyssa, a corporate attorney who came in to represent a contractor in a dispute with one of my project managers. And I swear the moment she walked into the conference room, the air shifted. She was confident, sharp, calm in a way that made everyone else feel like they needed to step up their game. And after the case settled, I asked her out. She said no. I asked her out again 2 weeks later. She said no again. 3rd time, she finally said yes. And we've been together 2 years now. And she's everything I didn't know I needed. She knows the whole story, every ugly detail, and never once treated me like I was broken. So 2 months ago, I proposed. She said yes. And we planned a small wedding. 40 people, no drama, no past ghosts, just us choosing each other with full clarity. Everything was perfect until 3 days ago when I got that text from Brooke. Jace, I need to see you. Everything isn't what you think. And I swear my stomach dropped straight to the floor because I haven't heard from her since the night my life detonated. I showed Alyssa the message because we don't hide things. Thought she'd tell me to block Brooke and move on, but instead she read it slowly, looked at me, squeezed my hand, and said, if you're going to face this, face it on your terms. Close that door properly. So I agreed to meet Brooke in a public place, the Edison Lounge, nice and upscale, and absolutely the opposite of anywhere we ever went together. And Alyssa came with me, not to intervene, but to sit in the corner of the booth and be a quiet reminder of the life I built. When Brooke walked in, she looked older, not just physically, but in that hollow-eyed way where regret carves permanent shadows under your face. She sat down across from me and immediately tried to ask if we could talk privately, which I shut down. Whatever she had to say, she could say in front of the woman I'm going to marry. She started crying almost instantly, saying Mason left her, saying everyone turned on her, saying she'd lost her job, that her parents barely talked to her, that she spent 6 years in therapy trying to understand her own self-sabotage, and that she never stopped regretting what she did. I listened. I didn't feel vindicated, didn't feel rage, didn't feel anything except exhaustion. Like hearing someone recount a car crash you barely even remember surviving. She finally said she hoped I could forgive her, and before I could respond, Alyssa leaned forward and said, "He doesn't owe you absolution." And I realized she was right. So I told Brooke calmly that what she did destroyed me, but also forced me to rebuild myself into someone stronger, someone better, someone who no longer thinks about her at all. I told her this was goodbye, and I meant it. She cried harder, but it didn't shake me. For the first time in 6 years, I felt free when I walked away from her. I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. What I didn't expect was that closing the door on Brooke would wake up every ghost from that period of my life like kicking a rotten nest. 2 days after the meeting, my dad called, a man who had barely spoken to me in 6 years except for stiff holiday texts, wanted to advocate for Mason, saying he wanted to apologize before my wedding. And I told him flat out no, that Mason had stopped being family the moment he betrayed me and that my dad had stopped being much of a father when he took his side. He didn't like hearing that, but I didn't care. I told him not to call again, that he wasn't invited to the wedding, and hung up before he could try to guilt-trip me into some forced reconciliation. A few hours later, my best friend and business partner, Matt, called and said Brooke had shown up at his office trying to convince him I was rushing into marriage because of unresolved trauma and that he should talk me into postponing the wedding. Matt nearly had her escorted out. When I told Alyssa, she didn't even hesitate. She drafted and sent a formal cease and desist letter to Brooke that same evening, basically telling her that if she contacted me, Alyssa, or anyone in my circle again, legal consequences were coming. I didn't realize until that moment how much I needed someone in my life who didn't just love me, but actively protected the peace I built. But the chaos wasn't done yet. The next morning, I got an email from Mason, pages long, rambling about how he's grown, how he's getting married now, how he wants to make amends, how Brooke reached out to him and seems unstable, how I should have compassion. I forwarded it straight to Alyssa. She asked, "Want me to send him a cease and desist too?" I said, "Maybe later." The wedding was days away, and I was trying not to let old wounds bleed into something that was supposed to be the beginning of a new life. But I won't lie, some part of me was afraid they might show up at the venue, try something, cause a scene. Alyssa noticed the way my leg bounced when I was anxious, and she took both my hands in hers and said, "This is our wedding. They don't get to take one more thing from you." The venue had strict guest lists and tight security, and that helped settle the storm in my chest a little. The day before the wedding, I got one final message from an unknown number. "I'm sorry, Jace." And Alyssa simply deleted it from my phone without showing any expression at all. And then came the wedding day, and it was everything I needed it to be. The weather was perfect, the ceremony small and intentional, filled with people who stood by me when I had nothing and no one. Alyssa walked down the aisle looking like everything I once thought I'd never deserve, and during our first dance, she whispered, "No regrets," and I realized she wasn't talking about marrying her. She meant everything that led us here. And I said none, because it was true. I don't forgive Brooke or Mason, and I don't need to. I don't need to revisit the ruins they left behind or analyze why they set fire to everything. I don't need to absolve them so they can sleep better. Peace doesn't always come from forgiveness. Sometimes peace comes from building a life so far removed from the wreckage that the past can't reach you anymore. Since the wedding, I've heard bits of update through distant acquaintances. Brooke moved back to her hometown, works retail now, and keeps a low profile. Mason's engagement ended when his fiancée found out about his past. My dad is apparently on the outs with Mason too after some blow-up I don't know the details of, and I don't care to know. He sent a card after the wedding saying congratulations without an apology, and I tossed it without reading further. Meanwhile, Alyssa and I came back from a short honeymoon in Colorado, and she passed out on our couch with legal briefs scattered across the table and her glasses crooked on her face. And I remember thinking, this is what choosing the right person feels like. This is what a real future looks like. Not begging someone to stay. Not carrying the weight of betrayal. Not feeling like your worth depends on someone else's validation. My life isn't defined by what they did to me. My life is defined by what I built afterward. By the woman who stands with me now. By the quiet peace of a home not built on lies. And maybe that's the real ending here. Not the downfall of the people who hurt me. Not the apology I never needed. Not the ghosts trying to claw their way back in. The ending is that none of them matter anymore. Their choices shaped me, but they don't own me. I walked away from that burning house 6 years ago, and I didn't just survive. I rebuilt. I thrived. I found someone who loves me without conditions, without cruelty, without hidden motives. And if Brooke's message taught me anything, it's that closure doesn't come from hearing someone say, "I'm sorry." Closure comes from realizing you don't need anything from them ever again.